וכי נפשי אס השם. Today the Daf 49 Tractate Shabbat. It's dedicated to my mother, first cousin, Harav Shlomo Binyamin ben Yehuda Leib Ashlag. Just a few words about my mom's family. My mother's father, my grandfather, was Rabbi Yehuda Tzvi Brandwine. He's the one who was one of the giant Kabbalistic in the past generation. His brother-in-law, his Chavrusa, was Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag, who wrote the commentary Sulam on the Zohar. My late grandfather was the one who published this tremendous amount of work by Rav Ashlag. My grandfather was a giant, world-renowned in Kabbalah. And Rav Ashlag's son was also part of that. His name is Shlomo Binyamin, was a great rabbi. Today it's his Yortzeit, today meaning the day that we studied Daf Yomi, which is the page 49 in Tractate Shabbat, and I dedicated it to his memory. What are we going to study today? It's a fascinating subject. First we're going to continue in Hilchot Atmana. Atmana meaning to put some food in a certain temperature so it'll be able to maintain his warm, or sometimes issues with exceeding temperature. Then we're going to discuss tefillin. What tefillin has to do with that, I promise I'll tell you later. What we're going to discuss few halakhot in tefillin. If time allows, we'll go to the next Mishna as well. Page 49, 4 lines from the top of the page. Bizman shehen lachin. This is a quotation from the Mishnah, that the Mishnah said, when we have a teven, zagim, muchin, asabim, so there are 4 different types that we cannot put hatmana. Again, for those who are not so familiar, on Shabbat, there are certain ways to observe food. Nowadays we have these electric things that you can play around. Those days was different. So the minute you take a product from the oven, the temperature changed. So if you take a product before Shabbat and, for example, you wrap it up with coal, the problem is that those coals can increase the temperature of the product, can cook the product. And the fear is that on the top of that, a person can start moving around the coals on Shabbat, which again, it's like making a fire. So the issue with hatmana is mosif hevel, that's something that add smoke, that add a temperature. So the hatmana is forbidden in something that is lach, something that is liquid, but not yavesh, not in a dry. So the Mishnah said, bizman she'en lachin, that's apply only when they are liquid, is wet. Ibailu. So they ask a question. What's the question? Lachin mechamad atzmam, or lachin mechamad davar acher? Which means the idea that they are moist, the idea that they are wet, it's due to their own natural state, or it's moist due to something else because they were soaked with liquid. So the big question here is what exactly the reason that and we discuss it later in the practical halakha, what exactly the reason that we say that you cannot put that food and cover it with certain materials. Is that because it's moist and wet or not? So tashma, so we go and learn the Mishnah. לא בטבן ולא בזגין ולא במוחין ולא בעשבים בזמן שהם לחין. Here we speak about a pot of straw, grapes that you take out the juice and it's a little seed left. The soft materials, grass, these materials are moist. So they said that's the problem with them, because the minute they are moist, those materials are basically carried their own issue, which is the minute you wrap it up with those materials, it's increase the temperature. So we understand if you tell me that they are Mishnah referring to material that are moist due to something else, fine, I understand that. If you tell me that the reason is because this material moist to their own, like they cover the food, so this type of mochin lachim, those type of wet, moist materials by themselves, how give me an example that's applicable. So they said mimarata devene atmei. This material is made from wool plucked from between the thigh of the animals, as that wool is usually damp from sweat. So that's the problem. So they said, והדתנא רבי הושעיה טומנים בכסות יבשה ובפירות יבשים ולא בכסות לחר ולא בפירות לחים. How about what Rabbi Hoshaya said? One may insulate a pot of hot food on Shabbat of any garment. So any garment, meaning something that it's clothed that moist due to his own natural state. So they said, "Ksut lacha mechamat atzma eichem ashkach la mimarta devei atmei." So clothes that made from wood pluck from between the thigh of the animal. So the wool was spun, and the cloth was woven while the wool was still moist. So as a result, so there is no final proof that this material in the Mishnah is prohibited only when the naturally moist, even with the moist due to another source. So in other words, it's only that when you combine it with something that it's moist or it's wet, it's again, it's not clear. It's remain a dilemma. It's remain a question. What exactly you are in a situation that you increase the temperature. In other words, if you take, let's talk in nowadays, if you take something and you put it on those electric pot, nowadays there are many. So I remember those days that when they brought the new pot that observed the temperature, you know what I'm talking about, the pot that you make chant, like, right? So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, one of my teachers, have a lot of objections to that. And it was a big to-do over there in regard
using
to
a crock pot?
Yes, some type of old crock. I'm talking about, let's say, 30 years ago, those big, that just crock pot began the process. Nowadays you have materials that you can use. But the key issue here is the minute you observe the temperature and you know that nothing will change the temperature is one thing. The minute you have issues that the temperature change, then it's issue. Now we go to the Mishnah. Mishnah, טומנים בכסות ובפירות, בחנפי עונה ובנסורת של חרשים ובנאורת של פשטן דקה. Since we discussed the issue of הטמנה, insulate the pot of food, so they said, טומנים, a person can insulate a pot of hot food on Shabbat, meaning before Shabbat, before the Shabbat begin, with what? In clothing. In fruits, in the dove's wings. Soon you see what is a dove's wings. Basically, dove, the difference between the dove and others is the dove, the wing, it's basically, he's not sleeping because if you look at the way that it goes, it's one wing cover, one wing open sometimes. And both wings is basically the protection for the body, right? So also in the carpenter's wood shaving, and also in the share of the fine flax, where if you see the carpenter, they're running something while they're walking, that's again materials that they use. Rabbi Yehuda osir badaka umatir bagasa. Rabbi Yehuda prohibited doing in the fine, meaning fine shaft, but permitted doing it with a coarse, which means he allowed to use big pieces. So again, here we're speaking about observation of certain temperatures. So because we mentioned the doves in the Mishnah, now the Gemara recite to us some story that related, but we're going to derive some learning from that story. Amar Rabbi Yanai, תפילין צריכין גוף נקי כאלישע בעל כנפיים. The Torah tells us the mitzvah of putting tefillin. You have to put tefillin every day. It's mitzvah taseh, it's the oraita, it's part of Shema, it's a part of our obligation. Now, the issue of tefillin is it has to have kedusha, has to have sanctity. Why? It's contained the name of God. And what's the problem? The minute it contains the name of God, then you put it on your body, it has to be the proper decorum, the proper respect. You attach yourself to God, to the Torah. Therefore, if your body is not clean, you cannot put tefillin. So they said it was a fellow, soon we see the story, his name is Elisha Baal Knafayim. Elisha Baal Knafayim is the name of a fellow that they call him Elisha, the man that carried a wing, man of wings. And soon you see why they name him like that. But it's a fascinating story. Now, a few points before we go to the story. When it's come to tefillin, we have many halachot, many halachot. The famous one is the Shulchan Aruch and Mishnah Brura that speak about the kedusha, the sanctity of tefillin. So basically, even you are in an area that they have a bad odor, bad smell, you have to stay 4 amot, 4 hand cubit from that place in order to pray. So here, we elaborate on that. So they said, Kelisha Bal Knafayim. Kelisha Bal Knafayim, the Tosfot and the Ran explained that he was a good role model, a good example, because a miracle happened to him because of tefillin. But Maihi, first we go to an explanation, what does that mean, clean body? Abaye Amar, Shelo yafiach bahem. Abaye said, the key point is that the person may not, break wind. In other words, is not release himself if he needs to go to a bathroom while he has the tefillin. That's what Rashi said. That's what Tosfot said. Basically, if a person knew that he has a issue, such as all kind of intestine diseases, etc., he cannot wear tefillin. Or the minute he feels that he needs to go to bathroom, he must take the tefillin. Rava Amar shelo yishan bahem. Meaning, first in those days, they used to wear tefillin all day long. But here they said even if a person it's not all day long, as long as he's not sleep with them. What's the issue of sleeping with them? So a man, while he's sleeping, can have erection and can have a discharge. And that's forbidden and a violation. So that's what basically Rashi said. Tosfot hold a little bit different. Tosfot hold because that people that were the family, etc. But the key point is the tefillin carry a certain kedusha, a certain sanctity. I think the way I read it, that it's mainly applied to the time of GEMARA because the people have the tefillin all day long. But in a tour in Shulchan Aruch, Or HaChaim Lamed Zayin 37, he holds that the reason that we have the decree to have it just for the time of prayer, not the whole day, in our days, it's because of that. It's because people have a limitation of how much they can keep the body sacred. Now the Gemara asks a question, why did they call Elisha the man of wings? Right? שפעם אחת גזרה מלכות רומי הראשון גזרה על ישראל שכל המניח תפילין נקרו את מוחו. So the Rashi said and Sfasem said that that's apply only to the head tefillin. They put a decree that whoever wear the tefillin, so they pierce the brain off, which means it's like in our language they give a bullet between the eyes and the brain. Whoever put the head tefillin, that was the GEMARA call it the evil Rome. So והיה אלישע מניחם ויוצא לשוק. It was one guy by the name of Elisha. He put the tefillin and he went out the market. ראהו כסדור אחד. Kasdor is like Castor. It's one of the ancient Rome. They persecuted, right? The secretary of the persecution or something like that. So רץ מפניו ורץ אחריו. Elisha ran away from him and he ran after him. וכיוון שהגיע אצלו, the minutes the Kasdor caught him, נטלן מראשו והחזן בידו. So Elisha took it off and held it in hand. So that's what said, why need to do that? So you said at a time like that you should have the act of sacrificial offering for the sake of God's name. So why he did it? So they said because he already put the tefillin, and because that's very important to know the Rambam and the Kesef Mishnah in regards to the Rambam hold that the minutes the mitzvah was made, he already put the tefillin, so now he has no obligation. Only the negative mitzvah, such as a violation of a sexual relation with animals, such as worshipping idols, so or eating a part of animals when they're alive, mitzvot like that. That's in general there is three mitzvot yarek val yavod. Gilui avodah zara, worshipping idols, Gilui arayot, which is forbidden relation, and shfichut damim, spilling the blood. So this is negative commandment that a person would rather die and not violate the Torah law. But here is a positive commandment, so the Rambam said, why? And the Kesef Mishnah said, there are several explanations, either because it was decree, or because the minutes that it's forbidden, it turned to be a special Mesiut Nefesh, special devotion for that. It's like Shat Hashmad, it was a time that they put a decree, etc. The Vilna Gaon disagree. The Vilna Gaon hold that he doesn't need to do that. It wasn't one of those mitzvot that Yarek Val Yavo. The reason that he did it, some hold, like Vilna Gaon hold, he did it because he was afraid that the fellow will grab the tefillin and trash them, or who knows what. So he was, that's the way he behaved. That's the reason for his behavior. Anyway, so Amarlo, the Kasdor said that this guy said to Elisha, Ma ze beyadcha? What do you hold in your hand? Amarlo kanfei ona. I'm holding in my hand dove's wings. Amarlo, so pashat et yado. So the guy said, show me. He opened his hands. Venimtzu kanfei ona. That miracle happened, and instead of the head tefillin, it was a dove's wings. So therefore, they will call him Elisha Bal Knafayim, Elisha, man of wings, because a great miracle happened to him. So now we learn a few things, right? We learn that that's the reason that they call his name, because such a great miracle happened to him. But here the Gemara elaborated on that and said, "Umayshna kanfei ona mishar ofot." Why this miracle happened to wings of dove versus other birds? Mishum de imtil Knesset Yisrael leona, because we compare in several places the assembly of Israel, Knesset Israel, to Yonah, to the dove. Shene'emar, they said in Psalm 68, Kanfei Yonah nechpa bakesef. They said that you shall shine as the wings of the dove covered with the silver, and her pinions with yellow gold. So it means Ma Yonah knafea meginot alea, just as the dove only its wings protect it, and it has no other means of protection. Meaning, if you look at other animals, they fight with the face,
with the
beak, right? But not with wings.
Right, and doves protect themselves with their wings.
Yes, that's right. Af Yisrael mitzvot meginot alem. That's so beautiful and so deep. That what, if you look, like Mark Twain asked, what's the secret of the survival of the Jews? He said all those nations, the Romans, the Greeks, all of them high rise and disappear. And the Jew remain. So here the Gemara explained, and it said the mitzvot protect them. Because the mitzvot is the marshal for Kanfei Yonah, for the wings of the dove. So that's the reason why he turned in that way. That's the Pnei Yoshua said. Now the Mishnah. Mishnah said, Bin soret shel charashim. So we said that one of the things that a person should not put the food, wrap it, is a carpenter wood shaving. So, Ibayaleu, Rabbi Yehuda anesor shel charashim kai or aneoret shel pi shtayim kai? When Rabbi Yehuda prohibits doing it and permitted with a chorus, so the question is, Rabbi Yehuda referring to a carpenter's wood shaving, or it's referring to sheaf of flax? So they said, Tashma, come and see the Tanya we learn in the Braita. Rabbi Yehuda omer neoret shel pi shtayim daka, הרי הוא כזבל. The Rabbi Yehuda said that a sheaf of fine flax is like the manure, which is like it adds heat, it creates warmer temperature, and therefore you cannot insert it there. Shma mina haneoret shel pi shtayim kai shma mina. So you learn from that the conclusion is referring to sheaf of flax, and that's the conclude for him. So rule number one, when we repeat the word Shema Mina twice, it means that's the final word, which means it's no further discussion. What we learn? We learn that this Braita that said that it's applied solely and only to sheaf of flax, that's the only one. You cannot say that it's applied to anything else. And that's, now we reconcile our question. Now, it means basically that we discuss halakha, practical halakha later, but it means that when it's come to hatmana, anything that have a chance to increase the temperature is forbidden. Tomnin bishlachin umetaltelim otam. One may insulate, cook food on Shabbat in the animal hides, and you can move those hides on Shabbat as well. Why? Because it's not considering a muktzeh. The Pnei Yoshua explains, because a person can lean on them, and begizei tzemer, also one may insulate food with wool fleece, and one in contrast may ve'en metaltelin otam. Why? Because it's muktzeh, you cannot move them. כיצד הוא עושה? So how a person can act that he wants to insulate food from in fleas and now wishes to remove the pot. נוטל את הכיסוי והן נופלות. He lifts the cover, it's permitted to move, and then the fleas fall by itself. So he doesn't need even to touch it. Now, here we talk about that part of the cover is open and you can hold it. רבי אלעזר בן עזריה אומר, קופה מטה על צידה ונוטל. רבי אלעזר בן עזריה said, if they place the pot in a basket filled with fleas, he leans the basket on its side and that the fleas will fall to the side and take the pot. Now, the reason for that is שמא ייטול ואינו יכול להחזיר. Because the minute you take it, you cannot return it. Why? Because the pieces around the pot, the gizim, will fall from it. And then you have an issue to put it back and hold it for the next meal. You cannot find a spot to put it because the gizim, it's muktzeh. And you cannot move that gizim from one place to another. It's like the wool is set aside. V'chachamim, however, the sages disagree. Omrim notel umachzir. The sages say that you can carry out and take the pot and afterward replace it. And later the GEMARA explain why they disagree with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rativ Rabbi Yonatan ben Achinai ורבי יונתן ben Azar ויתיב רבי חנינא בר חמא גבאיו וקמיבאי לו. Here they set a group of sages together and they ask this question. שלחין של בעל הבית תנן, אבל שלומן כיוון דקפיד עליו לא מטלטלינן להו. They say that the reason that we learned halacha in the Mishna is regard to hides of a common homeowner. However, hides of a craftsman, so he may not move. Why? Because the person said specifically that he doesn't want them to do it. It's called lehakpid. Because honor is usually not for sale. He's just made it for himself. So, because they use it, so they don't care if it becomes dirty, etc., etc. But somebody who's doing it as an expert, that it's about to be sold, so the owner is very strict that it should not become dirty, and there's no other purposes, and therefore you cannot carry them because it's not muktzeh, it's not set aside, and I'm sorry, that it is muktzeh, it is set aside, and it's called chisaron kis. Chisaron kis meaning that you reduce the value. It's like hole in a pocket. או דילמה של אומן תנן וכל שכן של בעל הבית. Or you may said that the Mishnah meant that this type of orot, this type of hides of a craftsman you can carry it, and for sure by the owner of the, which means that's definitely okay. So he said Amar lehu. So he responded and he said, Rabbi Yonatan ben Lazar mistabra shel baal habayit nan aval shel uman kafid alayu. We understand from our svara, from our rational, logical thinking, that this apply to the owner of the house, because if it's a professional, if it's someone who's expert, he will be angry and he will not be happy with moving them, and therefore you should not do it. However, אמר לו רבי חנינא בר חמא, כך אמר רבי ישמעאל בן יוסי. He disagreed with him. He said, 49b, אבא שלחה הווה ואמר, my father, which is Rabbi Yossi, he was a tanner, And one Shabbat he said as follows, Haviu shlachim v'neshev alehem. He said, bring, and here the Rashi, the Tosfot, etc., they have all kind of, but basically he said, bring shlachim, bring hides, and we sit with them. That's they sit on them. That's Rabbeinu Hanan. In other words, even the hides of craftsmen you can move on Shabbat. So now the Gemara asks a question for those who lenient. Meitivein esarin shel baal habayit mטלטלים אותם ושל אומן הם מטלטלים אותם, ואם חישב עד להם פת לאורחים בין כך ובין כך מטלטלים. So we said that when it's come to a board, which is pieces of wood that belonging to a homeowner, so one may move them on Shabbat. However, those belonging to a craftsman, one may not move them. Now, if he thought in advance to place bread upon them for the guest, and it was in advance, regardless, you can carry. Why? Because it's not considering a set aside, it's not muktzeh. Which means that stam nesarim, a regular wood, it's muktzeh. Because the owner is strict, he doesn't want them to use for that. So that's apply also to other things, to the orot as well. So he said, no. Shana nesarim de kafed alau. Wooden board are different because a person is very strict, is very particular about them. That he wants to make sure that they'll not get damaged or they destroy. So you cannot compare that to the hides. It's two different things. Now, Tashma. Now we learn from the Braita. Orot, hides בין אבודים ובין שאינן אבודים מותר לטלטלם בשבת, regardless if they 10, whether they are not 10, it's permitted to move them on Shabbat. לא אמרו אבודים אלא לעניין טומאה בלבד, which means that the sages explain that there is a difference between a 10 and not 10 applied to only ritual impurity. That the Meiri said that that's the only 10 hide because that's the only one who become ritually impure. My love לא שנה של בעל הבית ולא שנה של אומן, which means there is no difference if the hides belong to a homeowner or to an expert or craftsman. Why? Because in both cases you can move it on Shabbat, which means that this type of hides that made by a craftsman, it's not muktzeh, it's not the issue of muktzeh, is not set aside. So the GEMARA rejected and said, no, shel baal habayit, that speaks specifically, the Braita speak exclusively belonging to whom? To homeowner. But if you talk about a craftsman, like an expert, it's considering a muktzeh. Now, we said, if that's the case, aval shel oman mai, so in regards to hides belonging to a craftsman, what is the halacha? The answer is, ein metaltelin. You're going to tell me that they not move them on Shabbat? What they told the bride? The sages say that the 10 hides is distinguished only in regards to Tumah, ritual impurity. So the Braita need to distinguish and teach within the halakhot of Shabbat itself. לפלוג ולהתנה בדידה, במה דברים אמורים בשל בעל הבית, אבל בשל אומן לא. So that we need to say it specifically for the prohibition of muktzeh itself, that but only with the homeowner, but not with the expert craftsman. So the Gemara answered and they said, Kekula bebal habayit kamayrei. That the Braita speaks about this type of hides that belong to the homeowner. And there's no difference between the one who is me'ubad or not me'ubad, some so that already use and improve or not, because both of them have the same category, that it's a Baal Habayit. But that's the only one that we talk. We don't talk about an expert owner. Ketanai, that's the same as a Tanaic parley dispute between the Tanaim, as we learn in the Braita. Orot shel Baal Habayit, hides belonging to homeowner, metaltelin otam. A person can carry and move it on Shabbat. V'shel uman, and those who are the craftsmen, ein metaltelin otam. One may not move them. Rabbi Yossi omer, echad ze ve'echad ze metaltelin. Rabbi Yossi said that both cases, regardless if the homeowner or craftsman, one may move them. Hadu yatve v'kami bayaleu. Had the Tanan avot melachot 40 kaser echad keneged mi. As you know that we have 39 type of work that forbidden of Shabbat. But the question is, you can combine some and make them under one category. Why you need to separate and make them as separate entities to all in each one? So you have to have source in the Torah to 39. So Tosfot said, the Gemara here asked, what is the real source from the Torah for that 39 melachot that forbidden on Shabbat? Amar lehu hadetnan, Amar lehu Rabbi Chanina bar Chama keneged avodot hamishkan. This is something I would like you please to remember, because that's a key point for our studies. He says that this melachot, this 39 type of work, it's derived from the story of the tabernacle, from the story of the Mishkan, which is at the time of the Mishkan, the Torah said that in Parshat Kidisa, that the whole definition of work that need to be done in the Mishkan, and then the next thing the Torah said in attachment, the prohibition of violation of Shabbat. So because it was one
juxtaposed,
attached, juxtaposed, but more than juxtaposition, just next attach the idea of the labor, the works that involve in the Mishkan, and then the prohibition against doing work on Shabbat, because it's written one next to the other. We learn that whatever was in the Mishkan, whatever was in the tabernacle, it's also forbidden on Shabbat. And therefore, each and every one of those 39 is considering Av Melacha, is considering a different entity of type of work. So we derive from that a lot of things. Rabbi Akiva Iger and Gili Rashas elaborate on that, but in short, what it means that those categories are basically each one of them, when a person does them, is in violation of Shabbat. So that's key. Remember, when it's involved in type of work on Shabbat, we always derive the source is the Mishkan. By Rav Yosef, there is a second opinion that said that I'm sorry. אמר לו רבי יונתן ברבי אלעזר, כך אמר רבי שמעון ברבי יוסף בן לקוניה, כנגד מלאכה מלאכתו ומלאכת שבתורה 40 חסר אחד. Because they count in the Torah, and the word melacha, work, is mentioned in the Torah how many times? 39 times. So we learn from the pasuk, you should not do a work on Shabbat, lo ta'aseh kol melacha, that we cannot do any type of works that mention in the Torah 39 times. So every time the Torah mentions the word melacha, we derive from that a prohibition of Shabbat. Now, not everyone agreed, because there are those, some of the commentators count melacha more than 39 in the Torah. So some said that that's applied to melachot that specifically derived from Shabbat. There are others who say that that's the reason we juxtapose it to the Mishkan, because that's exclusively and nothing in addition to that. But in short, by Rav Yosef come and ask a question. He says, it's written about Joseph and the wife of Potiphar, ויבוא הביתה לעשות מלאכתו ממניין ההוא או לא? What they said about Yosef, that he came home to do his job. You know, the Yosef was the maintenance guy in the house of Potiphar, where it was a big party. Remember the story? And he came to do his job, and then she started up with him, right? So they said that, and that's said that לעשות מלאכתו, that he come to do his work. What type of work does Joseph has to do in the palace, in that house? So אמר אביי וליתי ספר תורה ולימני. So Abaye said, you know what? Let's take a Sefer Torah and count the time that it's written melacha, work, and see if the story of Joseph is part of that or not. Milo, Amar Rabba Bachan Amar Rabbi Yochanan. They said yes. Lo zazu misham. They didn't move there. Ad sheviu Sefer Torah umnaum. So until they brought the Sefer Torah. And imagine these guys, imagine the picture, they're standing there all day and they count how many times they have melacha. But according to some meforshim, it wasn't just that. They want to count for other purposes. But anyway, they stood there and they check how many times it's written melacha. Amar le Rav Yosef ki misapka lei. My question wasn't there. It's because Mishum Dechtiv, it's written when it's come to give a contribution to the work of the Mishkan. The Torah said in Shmot, in the Exodus 36, Ve'amlacha hayta dayam. They said that they complete the labor they had was sufficient. So they want to know if that's part of that or not. Miminyanahu. וכמאן אמר לעשות חכם נכנס, או דילמה ויבוא בית לעשות לחתום מעניין ההוא. ובמלאכה יד הים. So in other words, is that part of how you count this line? It's something that you need to do for the Mishkan, like they used to do the line of the gold. They used to do the labors that involve with the putting together the wood pieces. Mm-hmm. So they said there's verse that said that Joseph needed to do his tzrachav, his engaged in the relation with Potiphar's wife. The enters. That's that. You know, it said he came to the house to do his labor. It's something else. So they said. The Yomen to say that they are completed all the preparations labor, which means they brought all the materials and they engage with the actual labors, that it's also considering work in the Torah, because the Rashi said that he came there and they're about to have relations, but then he saw his father face, who said that you know, they're going to have a breastplate and they're going to have all the names on the breastplates of all my children that the high priest will carry. Do you want your name to be out? And that he saw it and he heard that just before they're about to have relation between Potiphar's wife and him, and then he backed off. Right? So they said here, Teiku. So basically, this uncertainty stands, it's unresolved. We don't know the resolution. We're waiting for the Tishbi Yetaretz Kushiyot V'ibayot. We know whenever time comes, the answer to this question. what's the real source of the 39 in that sense. Tanya keman de'amar keneged avodot hamishkan de'tanya. So the one who said that it's because of the labor that he used in the Mishkan, he has said as follows: Ein chayavim, the whole idea of mita and karet b'mezid, or sin offering if you do it unintentional, אלא על מלאכה שכיוצא בה הייתה במשכן, only apply to some type of work that they used to do in the tabernacle. Any violation of those type of work, that's the punishment. Hem zar'u, for example, they planted a seed for the sake of the work of the Mishkan. Why they need to do it? So because they need the chilazon. Chilazon, we said that in order to make it a bluish, very special blue, they need to place the place of the seed in the ground, and the result they can use it as samemanim, as something that can carry the color of the chilazon. So the big question is if they planted it in a desert or they have something that's ready, but because they need it for the Mishkan, for the cover, etc., so that's considering one type of work. ואתם לא תזרעו, so therefore you cannot plant the seed on Shabbat. הם קצרו, they, the same thing, they cut the product.
Harvested it. Yeah.
What?
Harvested it.
Harvested it, ואתם לא תקצרו, you should not harvest. הם העלו את הקרשים מקרקע, they lift up the woods from the bottom of the camp, that it was רשות הרבים, public domain, לעגלה, that is רשות היחיד, is a private domain, ואתם לא תכניסו מרשות הרבים לרשות היחיד, you not allowed to carry from public domain to private domain. הם הורידו את הקרשים מהעגלה לקרקע, they put up the wood pieces from the wagon to the floor, ואתם לא תצאו מרשות היחיד לרשות הרבים. And you should not go from private domain to public domain. הם הוציאו מהעגלה לעגלה, ואתם לא תצאו מרשות היחיד לרשות היחיד. They carry from one wagon to the next, and you shall not carry from one place to another. In other words, the Levim that stand on the floor, they move those wood pieces that was standing in those pair that close to the tabernacle. So he said, you cannot do it. מרשות היחיד לרשות היחיד, מה יקעביד? If someone transfer from private to private domain, what's the problem? אביי ורב אדם את רבי וביתם הרב אדם ברבי ברבה מרשות היחיד לרשות הרבים דרך רשות הרבים, which means those wagon wasn't really attached to each other. So basically a person go from a private domain, you need to pass by a public domain in order to go to a private domain. So we derive from that the whole איסור השתה, which means that you should not carry and hand it over from one location to another. בגזעי צמר ואין מצלצלים אותם. So now we say that one may insulate food in a wool fleece, but not move them. אמר רבא לא שנו אלא שלא תמן בהם, אבל תמן בהם מטלטלים אותם. רבא said, this הלכה, it's apply only in the case when they did not insulate food on it. But if one insulate cooked food, he may move it. In other words, by insulating food in the fleece, he indicated that he intends to use it on Shabbat. So it was one person that came that day. What does that mean? There is a concept in GEMARA, it's called Bar Beirav Lechad Yoma. That's someone that come for one day to yeshiva. So you can go either way. Either as a fellow that live far, so he travel long distance and come back long distance, and in between you have a one day to study full day in yeshiva, and that day you have a question. Or you said, like they have it in many places, that they dedicate a day to study Torah all day, meaning day full of study. But anyway, that you can go another way, that Rab Nissim Gaon said that it was the first day of a student. He was the first day in yeshiva. So he asked Rava a question. later you see that he doesn't ask Rava, but he asks a question in regard that what they said in Beit HaMidrash on behalf of Rava. טומנים בגזעי צמר ואין מטלטלים אותן כיצד הוא יוצא. If you tell me that one may insulate food in the wool fleece and one may not move it, how then does he act if he insulated food in wool fleece and now wishes to remove the part? So the Gemara answered and they said, נוטל את הכיסוי ואין נופלות. He lifts the cover, which is permitted to move, and the wool fleece fall by itself. So that's basically the opposite to what Rava said earlier, that even wool fleece, which a person insulated food, he can move it on Shabbat. So we talked today a lot about Hatmana, and we need to see some practical halachot. First is the Rambam, הלכות Shabbat chapter 4 and Bet Yosef, or Achaim 257. בזמן שאין לחים, when they are moist. So according to the Rambam in the Tur, it is prohibited to insulate a pot of food in gray skins, soft materials, and grass, whether they are moist due to their own natural state or the moisture originated from external source. According to the Rosh, if the moisture originated from external source, it is permitted to insulate food in them. That is based on the fact that the issue was not resolved in the GEMARA, and in cases of uncertainty with regard to matter of rabbinic law, usually we said, Safek de Rabbanan lekula, we go leniency. Tomnin beksut yeveisha, one may insulate a pot of hot food on Shabbat Eve, in a garment, in produce, in feathers, or in wood shaving. That's the Mishna said, opposite the Rabbi Yehuda. We learn also the guf nakilet tefillin. One who's done tefillin must be careful that his body is clean. That's the explanation of Bayav and Rava. That's the Shulchan Aruch said in 37. Now, basically, if you wear tefillin and somebody else is not clean, you have to stay away. You have to go 4 cubits from that spot. Tomnin beshlachin ubegizei tzemer. One may insulate pot of hot food in hides or in fleece before Shabbat. If one insulated a pot of cooked food in fleece on Shabbat Eve, even if he did not designate it for that purpose, the flea may be moved on Shabbat. Now, also we said that the Rabbi said bring hides and we may sit on them. It is permitted to move dry hides, whether they belong to a craftsman or homeowner on Shabbat. Several commentaries explain, it's also the Rambam, that the ruling apply only to a cattle hides that is suitable for sitting. However, sheep hides may be not moved unless they're designated for sitting before Shabbat. Wooden board belonging to a homeowner may be moved on Shabbat. However, lumber owned by a craftsman may not, unless prior to the onset of Shabbat he thought to use them to serve bread to guests or some other purpose. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Now, we last halakha of today, it's the in regards to gizei tzemer. So they said here, one may insulate food in wool fleece and may not move it. If one insulates a pot of food in fleece, the fleece may be moved on Shabbat, even it was not designated for that purpose. That's the Rava opinion. This applies to fleece that is not for sale. However, fleece that is in sale must be designated for the purpose of insulating food prior to Shabbat. Only then may be moved. That's the Rambam, Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 26. Hashem